All right, Mr.Taliaferro, how's everybody doing out there? So, big time news out of the NBA. Yesterday, it was announced that the general manager of the Houston Rockets, Daryl Morey, has made it official. Everyone on the Houston Rockets will be available for trade this summer. And I know that includes the NBA MVP technically at this moment, the bearded one, James Harden. Now, I want to say this. The chances of the Houston Rockets trading James Harden are slim and none, but everybody else is most likely fair game. And if you know anything about Daryl Morey, he's a very aggressive GM. Remember, this is the same guy who last year, at the beginning of the season, when Jimmy Butler was on the trade block from Minnesota, right? He was actively pursuing Jimmy Butler, and he was going to trade every draft pick that he could, meaning he was going to trade 4 first-round picks and 4 second-round picks to go for that championship. And by the way, he's probably needed Jimmy Butler down the stretch there in Houston. This dude's aggressive. He's not going to sit around and let his team just flunk. And he's obsessed with beating the Golden State Warriors. Now, here's how this happened. It's not about the Houston Rockets losing to the Golden State Warriors again, right? It's not about that. And by the way, Daryl Morey is on record as saying he's obsessed with beating Golden State. It's not about them losing to Golden State. What this all comes down to, and why he makes something like that so public to Woj of ESPN, is because, look, it's the fact that they lost to the Golden State Warriors without Kevin Durant. You see, I believe Daryl Morey could live with the Rockets losing to the Warriors with KD in games at the end of game 5, and in game 6, didn't even make it to a game 7, right? As long as KD's there, right? Because you say if Durant decides to go to New York, we can kind of weigh our options off that, right? Like if Durant leaves and goes to New York, then we believe we could beat Steph, Clay, and Draymond, right? We believe Harden, CP3, Tucker, Gordon, Capella and company, we could beat a Steph Curry-led Golden State Warriors team. They've said for quite some time they believe the difference maker was a Kevin Durant. Well, when you lose the end of game 5, and then you turn around and lose game 6 and lose the series on your home court without KD, I don't know what else you need. To me, that was the Warriors letting the Houston Rockets know, yeah, we might lose KD, he might leave and go to New York, wherever, but we still tagging into y'all ass. When we play y'all, we got y'all number, right? And I think Daryl Morey said after that, look, I got to make some moves. I can't do this. We're not going to beat this team as currently constructed. We got to go recook the formula. And that's how I think you get to a day like today when Daryl Morey is letting it be known everybody's up for trade. Here's the interesting dynamic for the Houston Rockets, and I'll break this down as quickly as possible. When they acquired Chris Paul 2 years ago, I believe the Rockets had a handshake agreement. Remember, Chris Paul was in the last year of his deal at the time, right? Think about it. He was with the Clippers. He was in the last year of his deal. And when he decided, essentially what he did was say, I'm not going to re-sign in Los Angeles. And the Clippers were like, okay, we're going to just trade you. And then pretty much that's when the Houston Rockets got in the mix. I believe under the table, the Rockets and Chris Paul had a handshake agreement. When you became a free agent, which was last summer, we'd re-sign you, right? I believe that was under the table. And I believe Chris Paul knew he'd be taken care of by GM Daryl Morey. So the Rockets had to honor that promise. They gave him a 4-year deal. Chris Paul's got 3 years left on that deal with the Rockets. He'll be 36 at the end of that deal. I believe he's going to make upwards of $120 million, $125 million. So he's pretty much making $40, $41, $42 million a year. Chris Paul has missed 69 games with his 2 seasons with the Houston Rockets, including a pivotal that I'll never forgive him for. That pivotal game 6 and game 7 that he missed. Not this postseason, but last postseason, where in my heart of hearts, I believe the Houston Rockets had the Golden State Warriors beat. And that was with Kevin Durant. This year, not so much. So I believe Daryl Morey's like, yeah, we can't beat this team. Chris Paul ain't the player that he used to be, and I'm stuck like Chuck with this contract. $40 million a year for a point guard that's pretty much playing half a season. Chris Paul is ruining James Harden's legacy. Look, I will criticize James Harden and say he dribbles too much and he shoots too much like the next person out there. And I'll criticize Mike D'Antoni for his coaching tactics and not getting up under James Harden and being a non-confrontational coach. I'll criticize both of those guys. But a lot of James Harden dominating the basketball came from the fact of when I give it to Chris Paul, he don't do anything. He don't do nothing no more. And now the Rockets are stuck with that contract. Now, are you asking me, will the Rockets be able to pull off this deal for Chris Paul? I'll tell you like this. You're going to have to sweeten that deal, right? Like, you can't just trade Chris Paul straight up. If I'm a team and I got cap room and I miss out, let's say I strike out on all the top tier free agents and even the second tier guys, because I personally rather have a second tier free agent than to pay Chris Paul $40 million for 3 years. Sheesh. I don't care how much veteran leadership you bring to the table. Rajon Rondo still poked you in the eye and spit on you. Look, here's what I'm saying. The Chris Paul era probably is over as a go-to guy in this league, a number one on this team, maybe even a number two. And I believe trading Chris Paul comes down to the trade value of Clint Capella and Eric Gordon. See, Chris Paul's contract is the attachment. He's not the A piece in any trade. His value at $40 million a year, trust me, no team willingly wants to take that on. But what you're trying to do if you're the Rockets is if I can give you, if you're interested in a center like a Clint Capella, okay, I'll give you Clint Capella, but you got to take on Chris Paul's contract with it. You like Eric Gordon's game, you got to take Chris Paul's contract with it, right? Like, that's what you're pretty much incentivizing a team. If you want Capella, if you want Gordon, you got to be willing to take on CP3's contract. Because I don't believe Chris Paul's value is enough at $40 million a clip. I'm not saying Chris Paul has no value, but at $40 million a year, no. And he ain't restructuring his contract. He'd be stupid to do that. He might as well take his money and lose his last few years in the league. This is his last big deal anyway. I don't blame him. But I just think what really has nailed the Rockets in is the fact that they had a handshake agreement with Chris Paul under the table, and they still gave him that deal last summer. I think that's what did them in. I don't know if I would have gave him that deal. I don't know if I would have paid him that money, because you kind of got to do it, right? You kind of, in theory, you got to, you bring this dude in, you trade Patrick Beverley, a couple other players, you kind of got to hold up, because like stuff like that spreads around the league. Like if they do bad business and they wouldn't have gave Chris Paul that deal, think about it. Like that probably would have pissed James Harden off. You just came off that emotional 7-game series where you missed 20-some three-pointers in Game 7. Chris Paul was hurt, right? You believe you could beat the Warriors, right? You believe you had them beat. So you kind of had to give him that deal. But this season was not good. Not only was he not the player that he used to be, he couldn't stay healthy in the regular season. We finally get to the playoffs, and he's available for you night in, night out, and he's a shell of himself. He had one good game, and that was Game 6, and it was too late at that point. Look, it is going to be tough to trade Chris Paul. I've thrown out a couple scenarios, and we'll talk more about this as the summer progresses. Please subscribe to my platform. I've thrown out the possibility of trading Chris Paul for John Wall. Hear me out. You get a point guard that can attack the rim. Their contracts are pretty much the same. Both bad contracts, by the way. I think Chris Paul and Bradley Beal will be better suited to play together in Washington. I think their games complement each other. Both can shoot. They're going to light it up if they can both stay healthy, right? They're small, but they can light it up from the three-point line. I believe that's a better fit for Chris Paul. He can shoot. He's become a spot-up shooter at this point. In regards to John Wall, I know he's going to probably miss most of next year, but he got that personality that, to me, for James Harden, I need somebody who's going to do. John Wall's going to do. He ain't going to just talk about it all day. John Wall, whenever he gets back, and hopefully he's 85-90% of the player that he once was, he's going to do. What's going wrong with James Harden is there's nobody to call him out on his BS. That was a bad shot. Yo, you came down the court and not passed it 4 straight possessions. I need you to pass the ball. It ain't going to be Mike D'Antoni, because James Harden's doing too much offensively right now for that team. Right? So you can't even call him out anymore. It's the Russell Westbrook, Oklahoma City Thunder thing. Who gonna call out Russell Westbrook? He ain't gonna do nothing but leave. He already feel like he doing you a favor staying there. I wouldn't trade James Harden, But I definitely would get a point guard in there that is not afraid of him, that seems to have seen some success, that's been a top guy. I thought it would be Chris Paul, but it hasn't been him. I would get an attacking point guard that can really command the basketball. I would go get a Derrick Rose or a John Wall, some of Coach Calipari's guys, man. You can get Derrick Rose in free agency, and I would consider doing Chris Paul for John Wall straight up and down. That's just me. I would not trade James Harden under any circumstance, but I'll do a video on that later today. Anywho, the Houston Rockets have made it official that they have everyone on their trading block, including James Harden for the right deal. I think that's incredibly unlikely that they trade James Harden, but everybody else is on the table. And I believe what Daryl Morey really wants to say is, I want to get Chris Paul the hell up out of here, and I want to get Clint Capella the hell up out of here. To get Clint Capella out of here, to get Chris Paul out of here, I probably got to give up Clint Capella, or I might have to do something that I don't want to do. I might have to give up Eric Gordon, which is the guy that I want to keep alongside James Harden. They can both light it up from the field. But look, you lose Eric Gordon to get away from Chris Paul's contract. That's just my opinion. What y'all think? In the comment box below, talk to me about this story. The Rockets are trying to blow it up to compete with the Warriors. I'm out.
I came from nothing, but I want everything God has for me. I interview celebrities. I talk sports. I still represent the culture.
Got the kids, they are now tuned in.
Yeah, we locked in right now, Mr.
Mr.Taliaferro.
Taliaferro.
Shout out to Mr. Taliaferro.
You're watching Mr.Taliaferro TV.
Mr. Taliaferro TV. Here with the triple B's, you can't do nothing but win.